rejecting the entire proposal?
Correct.
Thank you. Department of Education?
Monique Ramos with the Department of Education. So the superintendent continues to actually support the proposal and supports the new allocation amount. He particularly appreciates the fact that there was the elimination of the Career Pathways Trust dollars, although he does continue to have concerns with taking the grants to the State Board of Education, as it will delay getting those dollars out, and would recommend that a State Board member participate in the development of the RFP.
Thank you. Just back to LAO, as far as your recommendation is to reject the proposal, but would you recommend plowing these resources back into the LCFF?
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. Mr. Chavez, you have questions?
Real quick one for Department of Education. And I remember in the discussions we were concerned about the upfront money because career technical education had larger startup costs, equipment, for biocom or machinery equipment, and it was going to transition out. Has the Department of Ed or in the education community, have they defined what they call career ready versus college ready?
So I'm going to request Russ Weichel, our Division Director for College and Career Readiness, to answer that question. There are a specific group of CTE courses that are career courses that are defined, and those are, I believe there's 8 of those. And Russ, if you want to.
Good afternoon. Russ Weichel, Division Director for Career College Transition Division at the California Department of Education. Well, we don't, at the department, believe that it's possible to design a specific definition of what it means to be career ready. What we've done, I think, is taken that a step further, and we actually have established standards for what it means to be career ready. So if you look at the model curriculum standards in career technical education, you'll see that there are 11 what we call standards of career ready practice. And we believe those standards of career ready practice very clearly define what it means for a student to be career ready.
Are they different than the ADG requirements?
Actually, they are. They're actually a lot to do with the kind of skills that business and industry look at, like critical thinking, being able to work in teams, showing up to work on time, those kind of things. Very important to business and industry, and in fact I would argue that many people look at those standards of career ready practice and would determine that they're also indicators of college readiness and college success as well. So not only academically preparing students for college, but also giving them the right soft skills, if you will, to prepare them for both college and career.
Do you see FFA the same as CTE, or do you see it as a standalone program?
No, absolutely. Our career technical student organizations, not only FFA, but FBLA, DECA, Skills USA, HOSA, we consider those an integral component of a high-quality CTE classroom or program. In fact, in our state plan of career technical education, we have 11 quality indicators of a high-quality CTE program, and our career technical student organizations are considered to be one of those components.
Now, I know, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't FFA actually get a separate funding?
Yes. Actually, FFA did not get separate funding, but there was separate funding for what they call an ag incentive grant. Mm-hmm. So ag programs do have a small pot of very specific money intended to incentivize ag education throughout the state.
So do you see that going away then, waning down as the CTE is going down?
No, I do not.
So it's currently proposed to continue, I believe, in governor's budget to continue the ag incentive grant. It's not proposed to wane. It's not part of the career technical education program that the governor's proposing for 3 years.
But I just heard somebody tell me it was part of the career technical education program.
It's part of the career technical education program, but not part of this CTE incentive grant funding stream.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the overall update on the governor's proposal, and certainly, pleased by the increase in the amount. And I think you heard some of the some of the issues and concerns. And so flushing out some of the details as far as the implementation is noted. We're going to hold this issue open. I still think there are big concerns with not having it go out on kind of an even basis, and what that means for somebody that wants to participate in the community that doesn't have a district or a consortium where they're act together and rank high on the list. So I think it has some equity issues statewide, so we'll address that later in the week. Okay, with that, next issue, Commission on Teacher Credentialing.
Good afternoon. Kimberly Leahy with the Department of Finance. I'd like to begin with just a little bit of background before I get to the Governor's May revision proposal. Statute requires superintendents of school districts and charter school administrators to report to the Commission any change of a teacher's employment status while an allegation of misconduct exists. One of the Commission's core mission responsibilities is to monitor teacher conduct and take action to ensure that unfit teachers, for reasons other than performance, are removed from the classroom. When the Commission makes a recommendation for an adverse action against a credential holder, such as suspension or revocation of the credential, the teacher may appeal the decision and request a hearing before the Office of Administrative Hearings. The Commission contracts with the Office of the Attorney General to represent the Commission in these hearings. Following a highly publicized sexual abuse case at the Miramonte School in LAUSD in 2012, and a subsequent field notification by the Commission reminding districts of this reporting requirement, district reports of teacher misconduct to the Commission increased by about 300%. While it was expected that this would be a spike and that would subside over time, it has not. While the district reports of teacher misconduct comprise only 13% of all reports of teacher misconduct submitted to the Commission, they constitute more than half of the cases forwarded to the Attorney General. The current caseload pending at the Attorney General is about 250 cases and is projected to grow by about 10 to 15 cases per month, potentially resulting in over 400 cases at the Attorney General's office by the end of 2015-16. Often these district reports of teacher misconduct lack key information such as the names of victims and witnesses, requiring more time to develop and process, making district-reported cases very costly compared to other cases of teacher misconduct. Current resources are insufficient to address these increased costs. Furthermore, the Commission's non-discretionary costs, such as rent, data processing, and salaries, despite a reduction of 15.5 positions over the past couple years, continue to increase at about 3 to 5% per year, or at a rate of about $500,000. The current fund reserve of the Teacher Credentials Fund is at about 7% and is not expected to increase at fiscal year end to provide the funds necessary to cover next year's anticipated increases to non-discretionary costs. Pursuant to statute, the Department of Finance is required to recommend to the legislature an appropriate credential fee sufficient to generate revenues necessary to support the operating budget of the Commission, plus a prudent reserve. Therefore, the May revision proposes amending statute to allow for an increase in the teacher credential fee to a maximum of $100 for an initial or renewal credential, to provide the Commission with additional fiscal resources to support Commission operations and mission-critical activities, including the backlog of cases at the Attorney General's office. This proposal includes augmenting the Commission's expenditure authority by $4.5 million annually, with $3.9 million to address the backlog of cases at the Attorney General's office and about $600,000 to support operations at the Commission. Even with this level of support for the caseload at the Attorney General's office, coupled with the current $1.2 million that the Commission dedicates annually to the caseload, it could still take years to address the backlog. The May revision also proposes trailer bill language that would elevate from regulations to statute details of the information required in the district reports of teacher misconduct. This is in an effort to emphasize what should be included in a report and to provide the Commission the jurisdiction to pursue a superintendent or charter school administrator who fails to report teacher misconduct. Both of these changes are intended to improve the quality of district reports and ultimately reduce the Commission's Attorney General costs. I'd be happy to answer any questions on the Governor's proposal.
Thank you. LAO?
Jamil Naqvi, LAO. We agree with the administration that there is an issue with the backlog of cases at the Office of Administrative Hearings at the Office of the Attorney General, which deals with these cases. However, based on the backup that we receive, we believe that the funding proposal at this time appears to provide more expenditure authority than necessary to address that current backlog. According to the backup that we've received, the caseload at the AG's office for discipline cases has increased about threefold since 2012. And based on this, we estimate that the Commission would need an additional $2.6 million to deal with this backlog and the ongoing caseload at the Office of the Attorney General. And we estimate that a credential increase of $12 as opposed to the $30 proposed by the administration would be adequate to cover this $2.6 million increase to cover that backlog. We have not received justification for the additional non-discretionary costs that were discussed today by the administration. So at this time, we would recommend increasing the maximum credential fee to $82 from the present $70 to cover that additional caseload and backlog at the Office of the Attorney General. Additionally, we do support the administration's proposals regarding the changes in statute to kind of strengthen the language of required information and teacher discipline reports, and to give the Commission the authority to pursue superintendents and other school administrators that don't make required reports. We will note that it's required in statute for the Department of Finance and the legislature to look at the credential fee on an annual basis and assess whether it's adequate to cover the Commission's expenditures and maintain an adequate reserve level. And we would recommend that the legislature and Department of Finance continue to do that in the future to ensure that there's adequate revenue at the Commission to handle teacher discipline issues and other expenditures at the Commission. With that, be happy to answer any questions.
Proceed.
Good afternoon, Mary Sandy, Executive Director of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. We believe that the $100 fee that's been proposed by the administration is both appropriate and necessary to address the growing workload and backlog at the Attorney General's office. There are public safety and due process issues that really do need to be addressed in these funds. As proposed by the administration, we'll take care of that with all due speed and haste. We support the Governor's proposed funding levels.
Okay. Questions from committee members? Okay, thank you. Hearing none, we'll proceed now to public comment for this K-12 section, kind of a catch-all public comment period related to overall Prop 98 spending, special ed, Common Core mandate backlog, career technical education, and Commission on Teacher Credentialing.
Good
Okay,
afternoon.
hold on one second. Okay. We will do 2 minutes or less per speaker. Please try to assist if possible. Please proceed.
Estelle Lemieux with the California Teachers Association, but here today representing the Ed Coalition with my colleague from the management side, Terry Burns, with the California School Boards Association. We are very pleased with the governor's overall budget. It's pretty much in line with the Ed Coalition's budget principles that we have had this past January and also in April. With the ongoing dollars and the one-time dollars, we encourage the legislature to work closely with the governor and to stay the course that the governor has laid out for schools in this state. Thank you. And my colleague here, Terry, speak to the issue specifically.
We are very appreciative of the governor's intention of staying the course on local control funding formula. Doing so maintains the commitment to fully implement the local control funding formula in all of our districts. The one-time funds will help us fund the educational agencies in order to meet our local priorities and ensure successful implementation of the state standards and administration of the exams. The ongoing dollars, we're pleased to see an increase to a total of $6.1 billion to move us 60% closer to the LCFF targets, bringing us back to those 2007 rates that we had, making us able to invest in programs to close achievement gaps and to improve outcomes for all students. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members, Michael Hulsizer here today on behalf of the Kern County Office of Ed, but also in the sake of time, I've been asked to represent the Small School Districts Association, the Orange County Office of Education, the Suburban School Districts Association of California, and the Central Valley Education Coalition. We're here directly to speak to the letter that was given to you last week on Assemblymember Salas's letterhead, but signed by 20, now 22 members of the Assembly, requesting you to give consideration and support to fund SB 191 and home to school equalization out of the 15-16 budget. The governor has identified $2.1 billion of additional revenue at May revision. We're asking you to direct $147 million of that to fund home to school transportation equity. Currently, the state approves $1.4 billion of transportation costs for the school districts in California, but only funds about $490 million of that, or about 35%. The problem that SB 191 seeks to address, and the members are asking you to fund, is that many school districts in California are significantly below 35%, in some cases 5 and 10%, in growing areas of the state such as Sacramento County, northern San Diego County, Riverside, San Bernardino County. This bill would simply bring all school districts up to 50% over the next 7 years. We ask that you give serious consideration to this proposal that's supported by now 25% of the members of the Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Erin Gable on behalf of First Five California and the Early Childhood Education Coalition here to express our disappointment at the lack of inclusion of rebuilding in our early education system in this robust Proposition 98 year. But we would ask the Assembly to seize this opportunity and look towards significant investments within Proposition 98 in the same vein that we've discussed in previous subcommittee hearings that I will not elaborate on further, but in terms of access, affordability, and quality system investments. We'd also consistently like to lend our support also to the proposal of using new CCDBG funds toward a QRIS block grant concept for infant toddler providers, and look forward to working with the legislature and the administration on how this concept might be implemented for the budget year. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Beth Helmson with Fight Crime Invest in Kids, representing over 400 sheriffs, police chiefs, and district attorneys. I'm also representing Mission Readiness, made up of retired admirals and generals, and Ready Nation, made up of business leaders throughout the state of California. I'd like to echo my colleague before me on the investments in early education. We are part of that coalition, and we look forward to working with the Assembly further. I'd also like to thank you, Mr. Chair, and many of your members for their leadership on after-school programs, and we really, really would like to emphasize the importance of those programs and the need to increase rates for after-school programs. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Sarah Botches with the Association of California School Administrators, here to voice our support in the governor's May revision to many of the items listed, and also in support of the career technical education restructuring, taking out the Pathways grant, making sure that we're able to be more sustainable moving forward. One thing that we do want to continue expressing recognition is the need for Common Core, a state standard, and next generation science standards, a dedicated funding source. Thank you.
Enrique Roacho on behalf of the California Association of School Business Officials, and just want to lend our support to the governor's revised budget, and also appreciate funding of special education, CTE, and the payment for referrals, and also want to align my comments with those of Mr. Holsheiser in regards to SB 191 and funding the home to school transportation program. In full support of that as well. Thank you.
Leilani Aguinaldo Yee on behalf of the Los Angeles Unified School District. We support much of the governor's May revision proposal, in particular his commitment to continued implementation of the local control funding formula, as well as his adherence to local control in how one-time monies are invested at the local level. Thank you.
Hi there, Molly Tafoya, Early Edge California. Thank you to the administration and to this subcommittee for consideration for how we can improve and strengthen California's early care and education system. As you know, the governor's May revise included only minor increases for early care and education. There were some bright spots for infants and toddlers, and we support the May revision proposal to expand the early education program for infants and toddlers with exceptional needs. However, we need to see more for our youngest learners, and we urge consideration in 4 areas: provide preschool for all low-income 4-year-olds in California, build on the small increase that we saw in the governor's May revise, and continue to provide preschool for all low-income 4-year-olds in the coming years, increase access to quality infant and toddler care. Again, the governor's May revise was a bright spot for infants and toddlers, and we urge ongoing consideration for how we can increase access for our youngest babies. Building on the May revise proposals for professional development and quality improvement, we urge focus on increasing professional development opportunities for preschool teachers, aides, and caregivers, and creating an early learning and PD consortia that will assess current practices and improve the quality of teacher preparation through our community colleges. I have a handout that provides background information that I'll give to the sergeant. Thank you. And we also support allowing infants and toddlers to participate in the quality rating and improvement system. And then finally, we know we need to fully cover the cost of care and increase rates for our providers. Thank you so much for the opportunity to strengthen support for our earliest learners and support working families. Thanks.
Brian Ha on behalf of United Ways of California. We represent 34 United Ways in the state. While we are very pleased with the governor's overall direction as it relates to education funding on his May revise, we remain disappointed that he left out a critical piece, that is preschool. We strongly urge you, the committee members, both on the Senate and the Assembly, to consider funding, expanding California state preschool program. Thank you very much.
Nicole Rice, California Manufacturers and Technology Association, also here on behalf of Get Real, which is a coalition of labor, business, and educators who are supportive of career tech education. I just wanted to start out by saying that we, too, are also pleased by what we saw in the governor's budget as it relates to career tech education and the commitment to continue to build and support that system. We were also happy and pleased to see the increase in the revenues in the May revise going towards career tech education
education, even though it was on a sliding scale. But we would be remiss not to point out that the level of investment in that program still falls short of what the state's current investment is. We see that as a first step that the legislature can build on and use that as an opportunity to increase those revenues. For instance, the ROP MOE currently has $376 million in it. The Career Pathways Trust Program has $250 million in it. That's an investment of almost $600 million for career tech education. And that is still even less than what was in the fund almost a decade ago. However, we think the legislature has an opportunity to increase those revenue offerings to that level of $600 million or even higher so that school districts will continue to have the predictability and certainty that they need to do these high-quality programs that lead to these higher wage opportunities, such as in advanced manufacturing. And to particularly point to what the chair was talking about and also Assemblymember Rocky Chavez about the accountability standards, we feel that if you couple that higher investment with strong, rigorous standards on the front and accountability on the back, that we'll be able to get that system that will produce those high-quality programs that we are all looking for to make students work ready. So we appreciate your time and consideration.
Brandon Tartaglia with Disability Rights California. We're pleased that the governor took some of the Special Education Task Force recommendations and provided additional funds to special education, and we look forward to making more improvements with you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Deborah Brown with Children Now. We do appreciate that the strong economic recovery provides the legislature with a unique opportunity to invest in kids, and so our comments are in that vein. We appreciate the governor's commitment to LCFF and certainly appreciate that significant investment for the third year in a row for LCFF implementation. We do hope the legislature does look at further areas around transparency. Now that we have flexibility and equity, we also see transparency as important. One comment we would like to make is following up on the LAO's recommendations regarding where they see the revenues. We do think that's probably, the LAO is probably closer to where the revenues are and would urge the legislature to consider a budget that's closer to that. We also wanted to note that we do think that funding for Common Core is important, so we would like to see a dedicated source of funding for Common Core and next generation science standards implementations. Districts are really working hard to implement this and see that some short-term significant investments will help them go a long way towards getting students to master the standards. We also wanted to talk about the CTE pathways. We see this increase in one-time funding as really critical, and it's headed in the right direction. And we'd like to see some considering the distributional impacts of the proposal, focusing on ensuring that local investments are made in high-quality education. And then on early learning, we do see this as a really important opportunity to make significant investments, and do appreciate the governor's acknowledgement with the funding for special ed for our youngest learners, how really critical this can be. But we do think that there needs to be further investments so that we can increase access, quality, and affordability. And I would align myself with the comments of Ms. Gable. And then finally, on the CTC increase, we do think that it needs to be closer to the governor's proposal, and also the increase in funding for the after-school program. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Patty Herrera representing Riverside County Schools. We too appreciate the investments that the governor is making in his May revise, particularly we're appreciative of the discretionary appropriation of $3.5 billion in one-time money. We think that consistent with the local control funding formula, we'd like the ability at the local level to make use of those dollars. We'd like to speak specifically to the distributional effects of the CTE incentive grant program included in his May revision proposal as well as his January budget. We have some concerns about how those dollars are proposed to be allocated on a competitive grant basis, and specifically targeting rural schools or school districts with high dropouts. Not that they don't have needs, but we also have needs in other areas of the state, like Riverside County. For example, Assemblymember Chavez talked about the costly nature of startup costs within ROCPs, or particularly in Riverside County, with one of the largest ROCPs in the state, we're actually transitioning, our local economy is transitioning from one particular trade into a trade of services and healthcare, and there are costs that are associated with those transitions. So what we'd like the proposal to be amended to allocate those dollars on a per high school ADA basis so that we can actually grow our programs as part of our core academic program to ensure that every student in our county has an opportunity for post-secondary success. Thank you.
Bob Blattner on behalf of the Elk Grove, the Natomas, the Irvine school districts, and all the school districts in Riverside County in support of SB 191 funding for home to school transportation. In brief, while we agree in flexibility, there are three things about home to school which make it so different. It's so important for safety and for the carbon footprint. It's so expensive, and the costs are so differential. On top of this, it is all based back on Prop 13 funding levels. So districts like Irvine and Natomas and Elk Grove that have grown since then have never been adjusted for enrollment. So we have tremendously irrational funding distributions going on now with really, really, really severe impacts on program. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Pamela Gibbs, representing the Los Angeles County Office of Education. We, too, are in support of the Governor's general direction for the budget. Specifically, so that I don't repeat what's already been said, we are grateful for the local control accountability plan workload adjustment that the Governor provided in the budget, so we appreciate that. And we also urge your support for that item. We're also grateful for the direction that the Governor's provided regarding professional development and teacher training. We think now is a perfect time to focus on that as we continue to implement LCFF and start rebuilding our programs. So we urge your support. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Marta Alvarez on behalf of the San Diego Unified School District. For the most part, we support the governor's proposal. We think it's really great to see more investment in schools when we saw the greatest cuts during the recession. We support the LCFF augmentation of accelerating the amount of money that we can hopefully get to our target sooner. We think that the school district should continue to have that local discretion on how to spend the dollars. We understand there's a lot of need and interest here in Sacramento and in California to invest in other areas. But we as school districts, we have our local control accountability plans that we're developing with our communities. We have local priorities that our communities are asking us to fund. And so we just ask for that, keeping in mind the local flexibility of how we can spend the money. Regarding the one-time discretionary grants, we support the full augmentation. We do have some concerns about the leakage you heard from the LAO today, and perhaps their suggestion is a good one to take of giving the majority of the money for $3.3 billion for high school and unified school district that have done the most claims. There's also an issue about an audit risk. And then lastly, something that's not in the budget that we hope that will be part of the conversation is the RRMA flexibility that expires since it's on June 30th. We'll be providing a letter with comments. Thank you.
Not missing anything?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Liz Guillen with Public Advocates. We appreciate very much the increase in the ed budget, and particularly the continuing commitment to funding LCFF. We continue to urge you to focus on providing greater transparency on the state's commitment for supplemental and concentration funding, even as we're implementing LCFF, to ensure that we know how much districts are using to increase or improve services, but also how much the state is providing for the increase and improvement. We applaud Assemblymember Teen's leadership in moving the APA caucus to prioritize that issue. The mushing the Common Core standards and beginning teacher induction into the mandate funding is concerning to us. We believe those two issues are very important for the state. As it relates to beginning teacher induction, we feel strongly that on-the-job training where there is a local infrastructure and a local institution for higher ed to work with is the kind of support that beginning teachers need. To the extent districts are not doing that, and we know that there are some who are not doing that, the state should know that, and the state should provide targeted funding to make sure that that happens. With regard to the CTC proposal, we are still concerned about whether or not there's enough incentive to ensure that the programs that are used or that win the competitive grants are really high quality. We note that there is nothing now that requires or ensures that any of the CTE programs meet those standards which are aligned to Common Core, because there's nobody auditing those. So we would appreciate and urge you to require that there be some assurance that the standards are met. The prioritization that districts with low high school graduation rates be given priority could mean that those districts that are doing the worst are going to move up in line, and we think that's counterproductive. Finally, we appreciate and hope the continuation that the emergency repair project funds be fully funded and retired. Thank you.
Hi, Nicholas Chavez here on behalf of the California Association of School Transportation Officials. I want to align our comments with Michael Holzheiser of Kern County, and we would like to request the adoption of a funding for SB 191 and the appropriation assembly budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will now proceed to the next section. Adult education. Okay. LAO, you want to walk through the issue first for us?
Sure. The sergeant, I think, has distributed a handout on adult education. We start on page 1. My name is Natasha Collins with the Legislative Analyst Office. I don't think I said that. So we think the governor's May revision proposal makes a number of improvements to the January adult education proposal, which we outline on the figure displayed on page 1. First, it made significant improvements to governance and accountability of consortia. For example, it replaced the allocation boards, which there was some significant concerns about, with a governance structure to be determined at the local or at the regional consortia level and approved by the state. It also requires that a consortia member be represented only by an official that's designated by that member's governing board, so creates more strong lines of accountability in that sense. It also requires that the consortia consider proposed decisions, including the approval of regional plans and allocation schedules at public meetings, and request feedback and incorporate that feedback into their plans, which we think is positive. And it also requires the alignment of data that consortia collects with other regional workforce data, which we think is consistent with an integrated approach. Another improvement is that it better incorporates other adult education funding that the state receives, such as federal funding, Workforce Investment Act funding in Perkins, as well as funding for community college apportionments for adult education, and adults in correctional facilities, for example, in that those members that are receiving, or those entities that are receiving funding for adult education must become consortia members, and that funding must be accounted for in the consortia plan, so we get a more full picture of resources going towards these purposes within a region. It also provides earlier information to consortia so they can plan their course offerings and so on, and it also provides the framework for more consistent regional policies by asking the plans to include information about how the regions are coordinating placement, fees, student identifiers, and the like. Those are a few of the significant improvements in the plan. On page 2, we provide our assessment of some things that we believe could be improved. Specifically, the proposal now locks in an individual provider funding level in that it prohibits year-to-year reductions to a member's funding unless, except under very narrow circumstances. We believe that this would limit the consortia's ability to respond to regional changes and best serve the needs of their students. Second, we note that there are still some details missing from the May revision in that it lacks specific program goals and effectiveness measures. It also does not provide the legislature with prior notice of how state funds will be allocated, which we think is concerning. We think you might want to weigh in on that. We also note that it lacks statewide alignment of policies for assessment and accountability and student fees, although at the regional level it does put some framework there for that. We think at the state level that could be improved. Page 3 provides how we recommend you address these concerns. First, we recommend that you reject any statutory language that locks in funding levels for the consortia members. This would kind of take us back 2 years in that we think it would really limit flexibility and the ability for regional consortia to make local decisions and be nimble and accommodating to the needs of their region in accommodating adult ed. Second, we recommend developing clear measures of effectiveness based on the local performance reports that you'll receive. Because consortia are required to include measures of effectiveness in their reports, so we think it's a little preemptive to set what those measures are and set performance goals before we know what some of the plans are looking like and what we can measure. So that's something that we could address a little bit later, perhaps next year. Third, we think that you should receive prior notice of allocations to consortia by requiring the chancellor and superintendent to provide you with a month's notice before allocations go out. Lastly, we recommend that you set a deadline for the chancellor and superintendent in tandem with the California Workforce Investment Board to develop consistent state policies and an actionable implementation plan on a number of adult education policies, including assessment, placement, student identifiers, and student fees by July 1st of 2016. And we think that you should make this a condition of funding for the 3 positions in CDE and the 3 positions at the Chancellor's office to meet this new deadline, so we have some truly integrated and consistent policies that we can hold consortia accountable at the state level. Thank you very much.